How do I practice masculine frame and confidence? What is masculine frame and confidence? That's what we're talking about today on the C Note Show with myself and Cynthia Kruse in the frame of our head, heart, balls, and breath. We teach head, heart, balls, and breath within our one-on-one work and in our paid membership groups as well. And we're going to skim the surface here today with head, heart, balls, and breath of how to have more confidence. And this is a sketch of Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he said, "The one thing you can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond." Masculine frame, confidence, ultimately is about choosing how you respond and knowing that no one can take that away from you. No one can take that power to choose how you want to respond away. Maybe your wife is criticizing you, or maybe she is not sure if she's in love with you right now. You can choose how to respond, and that's the beginnings of masculine frame. Here on the C Note Show, we talk about long-term monogamous relationship, more intimacy, connection, and we want to offer her safety and leadership. And Cynthia, I want to ask you right off the bat about this from a man. We were emailing back and forth. He said, "So she wants me to be in charge of projects that she's passionate about." They're doing a house remodel right now, and she's passionate about the choices. And when he asks her questions, she seems to get flustered and as though it's his fault that he doesn't know these answers. And she's the one that's been spearheading a lot of these choices in the remodel. And he's wondering, how do I have masculine frame? How do I have confidence in these situations when she's saying that she's basically hurt that he's not taking charge in some way? He doesn't know what she wants, basically. So right off the bat, what are you seeing right there with, he's saying, am I never to expect her to take responsibility? And he keeps hearing from her, I want you to be a partner in these decisions. Mm-hmm. But when he brings it up, it doesn't seem to go very well. Talk with us about that to start with.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a couple of things there. One seems like a very feminine part of her, a real authentic way of responding. And another is kind of her woundedness. And the woundedness, I would say, is if he is helping her or doing something and she kind of blames him for not doing it right, or you're not doing it the way I want, that's one energy. But before that, there's something very deep in part of the limbic brain of feminine women that have like so much excitement for an idea and creativity and want to put out their desire alike, but then having to then do the logical steps to get that done can be really tough and put her back in her masculine. So it sounds like she's actually really wanting to be in feminine inspiration and then really craving that he then be like, yeah, let's make this happen, and creates the logical steps to do that. The wounded part that comes later, that maybe her just not trusting his masculine frame around this and not even know that that's what she's asking for from him.
Yeah, that last thing you said there seems to be a theme when she's not aware of how she's coming across, or she has so much on her mind that she's not able to show up as that excited woman that she wants to be. You and I were prepping for the call here today, and you said she knows on the inside that maybe she's not doing very well. And let's talk about that in a second. Let's step forward and read this a little bit more. This man goes on to say, perhaps it is her way of saying, I want you to take control, I guess. It's been a very confusing process because she says she wants this remodel, has very specific ideas how it needs to look and function. So why am I in charge of it? I was very content with how the house was. It wasn't perfect, but for her, it didn't feel like home. So knowing she wanted to redo a lot, she refused to put up photos and pictures on the walls. So I guess of ideas. Should have instead said, okay, honey, what is it that you want? All right, I'll take care of it. Should I have said that? And if she balks or complains about something I'm doing or deciding, do I just brush it off? So let's start right there. This is more of the dreaming, Cynthia, right? And we've talked about this if you're in our Kingly Life path. Talked about this in different ways of her dreaming and wanting him to dream along with. But then he's asking, okay, functionally, what do I do? Should I just say, okay, honey, let me take charge of everything? And if she doesn't like it, he's the middleman, I think is part of his question here. So what would you say about, does she want him to be the middleman, or what is she actually wanting him to engage in when she says, When does she want him to take control? Right? She has specific ideas, but he doesn't know what to do. Talk with us more about that.
What a tricky situation. And how quickly can the feminine desire of your masculine presence and confidence, how quickly can that turn into, does she want me to be in control? Then she doesn't want me to be in control. What I really see here is she's got a lot of layers of what's going on, a lot of story, things built up, but at the core is a very feminine desire. And then what she's yearning for is kind of what we're talking about here today. His head engaged, his heart engaged, his balls engaged, his whole body engaged with her on a soulful, this is, creative process. His head, his mind, his masculinity for here are the steps of how we make this happen. And then just a soul gut understanding that she's probably going to struggle along this process with her own, what am I really seeking for? And kind of a compassion and presence with that without losing the idea that this is coming from a real feminine place. And to see her in that as this environment is going on. Because ultimately, it's kind of that high regard thing too.
Yeah.
This is coming from a really good place, even though there's some sticking points along the way that don't feel as wonderful and flowing as he might like them to be.
Yeah. And I hope that you're giving yourself high regard along the way. You want good things. I think she wants good things underneath. When these pains jump up and seemingly bite your hand,
yeah,
that's where his questions are coming in. So let's finish this up and we'll step forward into the head, heart, balls, and breath specifically. He goes on to say, I'm just so very confused by the messages that she says when she says, I don't need you, I can take care of myself type attitude. Okay, great. Go take care of it. And then she says, why aren't you part of this process? You don't care about me. Attitude. She's told me several times, I feel like I'm the second player to your life, that I don't have my life. Okay, great. Go do the things you want. I'll do mine and we can have the relationship. The project was her thing, but she doesn't want to take control of it. She wants me to. It's so confusing. So this last piece here, I don't need you. I can take care of myself, she says, but then also wonders, why aren't you part of this process and you don't care about me? And feels that she's second player to his life and doesn't have her own life. And he's like, yeah, many of these things, I'm fine with all of these things individually. And when she stacks them all together, he doesn't know how to approach this. And so what are your thoughts from a woman's point of view when she feels that life is really hard in lots of these areas, and ultimately to help the man have compassion for that she's not maliciously being, difficult. And what is it that is going on here if she's not purposely being difficult, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say that is super confusing because everything he says that she says is a totally different energy. So I don't blame him for feeling jerked around. I will say that phrase, like, I don't need you, I can take care of myself, whether it's an attitude or she actually says that out loud, that's more revealing than the words. That's a false sense of self that women sometimes put out there when they feel a little diminished or not believed in, or like they're all alone in a situation. And it's a very big defense mechanism to not feel pain and heartache over that. It's also a way for her to kind of remind herself, I have my own identity, and it's this a little bit of masculine shielding. But I think what's truer, the phrase he should really listen to or just take into his own presence is, her essentially saying, I do want you to be a part of this. That to me feels like authentic femininity. And the rest are just little suits of armor that she's trying on. I think what's crazy about femininity is that their suits of armor never really get the job done. So it's finding out where's the authenticity that you get the truth.
So what type of suits of armor would you say?
Definitely the one of like, I don't need any help. I can do it by myself. I'm strong and independent. That's very much an inner phrase of something that she's heard or told herself. I shouldn't want help. I shouldn't want his masculinity to help me. There's could be a lot of shame around that. And what happens with that is that women really try to build that up. Like, this is what I should believe in. It's who I should be. They're really hard on themselves. And it never squashes authentic feminine desire.
That she's always wanting to grow a relationship there, that she's always wanting to feel these dreams.
Yeah.
Nevin, come on in, please.
Hey guys, really timely. I mean, this is really on point where kind of where I'm at right now, and I really appreciate this topic a lot. I've been finding myself in a place where I don't know where to be, how to be, and it has to do, and 100% has to do with the masculine frame that we talk about. I feel like I'm like kind of like navigating minefields. Like at any given moment, I feel like I may slip into the needy people pleaser that I'm trying to shed, and then the other sometimes I'm like, I feel like I'm coming from a place of like, resentful, bitchy, you know what I mean? Like, and like canyon of that. And it feels like even just exchanging text messages, or when we hand the kids off and all of that. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I start thinking like, what do I say? How do I text back and not feel like I'm, instead of just being, I mean, I'm more aware of stuff now than I was prior to doing this work. But I feel like I'm getting caught in this hamster wheel of how to be as opposed to just being. And I'm like how to make that jump. You know what I'm talking about? Especially when I'm feeling like she's in a place like exactly what you were saying, Cynthia. Like, no doubt there's been some kind of chatter in her mind where she feels like she needs to be independent, and she's pushing back on certain things, and maybe I'm aware of that, but I don't want to call her out on it because she's on her own journey. You know what I mean? Like, I start getting into all these like thoughts, and I'm like, it gets in the way. How to just settle into that masculine frame without getting in her way, pushing her away. Does that make any sense?
Sure. Well, let me ask, at the end of the day, Nevin, what's the concern about her? What's the concern about? Do you think you can affect some kind of change? Is there something you feel you need to lean into with her? Is there a concern in particular with your wife, your ex?
I just want to be. I want to stop thinking about all this so much. You know what I mean? I want to stop. Like, I just want to be in that masculine frame and be how I am. And if she turns back towards me, great. If not, whatever. I just want to not worry about that, and I want to not think about it.
Yeah, good. That sounds like the case. I wanted to see if there was a particular question, because it didn't seem like it. And so it sounds simple. And you tell me and ask a question for myself or Cynthia of where you get stuck. So why do you care what she thinks of you? Part of masculine frame is recognizing, but really ultimately not caring what she thinks of you in this moment, having a bigger scope on what's happening.
How to not care? How to not care? How do you do that? I guess that's the question. How do I not be so concerned with how my text is going to be received and wording it the right way? Did I respond too fast? And, all these kind of things. And
so you're worried that she's going to judge you in some way, that you responded too fast.
Sure.
Okay, and
I'm going to fall into the needy. I'm going to fall into one of these, minefields that I have a tendency to go into.
So, what are you wanting from her still? If you're worried about her judging you, you're still wanting something from her. Yeah,
I want a cordial and friendly co-parenting relationship now. That would be ideal right now. I'd be open to a reconciliation discussion at some point, if that would be something that she'd be into, but I'm trying to been working really hard on releasing from that kind of outcome.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And thank you for being totally honest. Right. So I'll ask Cynthia a question. So based off of the way Nevin just responded, his energy, where he's at, knowing what we know of his story, that she doesn't seem to, she's not turning back toward him, at least not now. Certainly there's been some scathing accusations of his character in the past, if you might say, right? So, like, to put it lightly, I suppose. And if he's thinking, well, okay, I'm censoring myself because I don't want her to be mad, because I want this kind of favorable outcome, how does that energy come across when he's concerned about her judgment?
Yeah. That makes so much sense to me, Nevin, and even how even text messages, whether you're receiving or sending them, can activate that wondering. And when you speak of that, or even speaking of what you want, I feel there's a little bit of uncertainty there, and almost a little bit of unclarity. And I'm wondering if she feels a little bit of that wavering in you. And then she might have her ways of trying to kind of poke back at that, or feel some more solidity, or almost try to like punish your masculine for not feeling more solid in that moment. And that might contribute to what you're feeling of I don't know where she is, and maybe there's an opening. And does that ring home at all?
Well, oh my God, so true. Yeah, you're 100% articulated that perfect.
And Nevin, part of what Cynthia is saying is, you're saying you can't rely on what your wife's going to do. Like, you can be nice, you can be cordial, but you can't control whether it's going to be a great co-parenting relationship. You can't control if there's a reconciliation conversation. So that's the uncertainty that you're actually feeling in Nevin. And do you realize that because you're thinking so much about that, it feels uncertain to a woman? It's like, it's a catch-22 situation, or cart before the horse, I suppose. Or it's like you're tainting her feeling, her being any woman. You're tainting her feeling of your uncertainty because you are leaning on what she may do. So it's how to not care as much as you have to know that your life's going to be awesome no matter what. And it's easy to say, harder to do, harder to implement. And that's part of our Get Love Back triangle here that I'll show you around masculine frame. So this is our Get Love Back framework, this triangle here. And the bottom layer is, we've titled masculine frame. And part of it is breaking codependency, resetting polarity, growing powerful self-worth. But the breaking codependency is going from feeling weak, alone, to maybe you're weak and lonely, to just alone, but more powerful on your path. And I know that that's been an up and down for you. Yeah, it's been up and down for you. So how to not care as much what she thinks is, well, if I can't control the outcome with her, then I'm really putting too much emphasis. I'm leaning too hard on a half broken leg, really. And what's counterintuitive about this is, when you lean on that half broken leg, hopefully hoping that she comes back, is it makes you feel fishy to her. Say a little bit more of that, if you would, please.
Yeah, the word fishy really hit home for me. Because the feminine kind of takes that feeling like there's something up, or there's a hidden agenda, or something to not be trusted. And then how she responds or reacts to that, whether she's done personal work, she can have space for that. If she's really wanting to blame you for her feeling that way, it might come out in really not kind ways. Or she might, disappear. As soon as she feels fishy feelings, she kind of disappears and stops communicating. And then as soon as she feels some solidity back, that there's a little bit more drawing toward you. But fishy for her is like a very uncomfortable feeling in her body.
Yeah, and most of us are romantic type of guys. We want the relationship, and that's where we get ahead of ourselves, is wanting the relationship at a time when to her it feels off-putting. It feels fishy because it feels manipulative.
Totally. You guys are freaking brilliantly articulating. Geniuses. No, I appreciate that. I sometimes feel like, especially after the past week, hearing about the news of Scott, and that kind of helped, I don't know, put me down this path of facing my own mortality. And I think a lot of men also in the community. And I think that unearthed a lot of stuff that I thought I had gotten past or worked through, that I was like, oh man, there's still another deeper layer of this that is coming up. So a lot of that's been bubbling up the past week, where I realized, man, I am still doing these things that you guys are talking about. And I do need to do even more work than I thought. So
yeah, we hear you. Thanks for being here, Nevin. Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure. Patrick, come on in, please.
My comments were going to be on your Reno problem. The female needs direction and wants him to provide it. So to me, the male makes the decision, and then the female's got something to push against. So he starts painting the wall pink, and she goes, I don't want it pink. We've got a decision out of the feminine. So he paints it green. I don't want it green. Eventually, when he's gone through all the colours, she'll settle on something, and he's provided direction. It's like she's going, I want to travel. Where? I don't know. You don't know where you're going. How do you go? How are you going to know when you get there? So, and if he isn't wrapped up on the outcome, he doesn't give a rat's ass if it's pink, blue, or purple. He just goes, there, that's what you want? Okay. No, it's not what you want. Okay. And then he just goes on with something else, completely calm, doesn't get emotionally involved in her decision, but she's lacking direction. I want to Reno. I don't know how many bathrooms I want, or what bloody shade of bloody vanity I want. He makes a decision and then lets her push against it. That's my view.
Yeah, I think that's very astute. Absolutely. So talk more about, some guys just think, right, that we just want a carefree relationship. If there's no friction, that's the best kind of relationship. If everything's just going good and I can do the same as I did yesterday. But that's not what the feminine's wanting, as Patrick was saying, and we talk about. She's wanting what instead? What does he mean by leadership or engagement in this way?
Yeah. And Patrick, I loved your example of going through all the colors of the rainbow.
She'll want pink again by the time you get back around. Yeah.
I mean, so I totally want to respect that there's a fine line here of just honoring the masculine. That's not, your job is not to go out and please the feminine. And that's not going to produce the kind of relationship that's wanted anyways. And what you were saying, Patrick, about her getting to push up against something, I can so resonate with. The feminine is really not a great decision maker logically. And it will often feel, if she has a lot of options in front of her that are all tied to very different strings in her brain, she will feel lost and overwhelmed and angry or at herself or you. But when there's riverbanks, when there is like this masculine presence that very adeptly is like, oh, I'm going to be okay for you to bounce off this wall and feel into that. That makes a huge difference for the feminine to kind of feel her yeses and nos. But I do say that humbly because I know that's a practice in itself, a practice of your presence. But the feminine does crave that. And without those riverbanks, that's when you get the armor of her being like, I should be totally independent. I should not need you. I should not need anyone. And that false sense of her own riverbank she tries to create very unadeptly.
So there's a man that I speak with all the time who we say emotion over content. Like, what's the emotion that she's giving off over the content of what she's saying? Is anyone facing a challenge like this in their life right now? I'm going to jump forward to the head, heart, balls, and breath here in just a moment. Are you facing a challenge where she says one thing and another thing is coming up, or she's asking for your leadership, but then she pushes back against your leadership? Punch into the chat, please. We'd love to highlight it. So the head, heart, balls, and breath. We'll go through these quickly, and I'll circle back around to speak about each of them. Head, high regard, gratitude in your mind, kingly vision in your mind. And what does kingly vision in your mind mean? What does high regard mean? Kingly vision is, I just announced this to another man last week for the first time. Kingly vision is, can you literally feel what it's like if you were a king? If you were a king in your time and this is your land and you're a benevolent king, can you feel that pride, that clarity, that direction that you would have? And maybe, yes, the burden as well, but that clarity that you could have in your mind that you would have as king when you walked into the kitchen, or your woman walked into the kitchen when you were in the kitchen already. If you're ever in a space with her, to reset into that mindset of being a king. Before I step forward, Paul, yeah, come on in, please.
I think I have an example for some of this. I'm fortunate enough to still be married to my wife and to still have, a relatively deep connection with her a lot of the time. And we're going to be married 13 years next month, meaning in March, because today's still February. So yeah. I went ahead and just booked a trip to Boston. Like I didn't really ask her. I just mentioned that I'd like to go somewhere with her. She was receptive to that. And so the leadership opportunity that I saw in the moment was just to say, hey, I want to go there. And so that's the trip I booked. And then I just started kind of making reservations, for dinner and stuff like that. And then I presented those opportunities to her. I said, hey, this is kind of what I came up with. It's a loose itinerary. I think this would be a lot of fun. I booked a tour of Fenway Park, which I can't wait for, and just kind of presented her with those opportunities. And she actually pushed back a little bit and said, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Yeah, that sounds like fun. And we just kind of collaborated and dwindled that down to some more definitive plans. And it felt good to me in a lot of different ways, because I felt like I did take a lot of initiative to just kind of get the ball rolling. But I also felt like I gave her the opportunity to, either accept or reject what I had come up with. And I wasn't offended when she said no. I mean, frankly, I don't really care what we do outside of Fenway Park.
Yeah.
But it was pretty neat just to see that unravel in front of me, not be offended by it, and also feel like I did what I could to kind of surprise her, keep it light, but also value her opinion. So I hope that kind of goes in line with what I think I heard over the last 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, Paul, absolutely. And is she the kind of woman that wants to be a part of the decision-making process, even though maybe she doesn't speak up very much about it? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she can be very wishy-washy about things, and I feel like I get pulled in a lot of different directions. So that's kind of what came up for me listening today. And it's a struggle, man. It's hard to know sometimes, but I thought that this trip was a pretty good example of how to just kind of take the lead and talking about masculine frame. And she can be a good decision maker once she gets the juices flowing, but initially it can be difficult for her to pinpoint what she wants. So
yeah, the cold starts are hard, but once you get the ideas flowing or the visions flowing. So he put these visions on the table. Hey, here's one place. This is what it would look like or feel like. Here's another place. This is what it would look like or feel like. What might you add to what Paul was saying there?
Yeah, I so appreciate that you shared, like, this can be such a struggle, and your term wishy-washy was so perfect. And I can only imagine how it got to feel not only in her heart, but in her own like gut of groundedness, to be given the opportunity to connect to options. So it's not just the vast ocean, and then feel into them, and then give her honest expression in a container that sounded like she really trusted and had faith in. And I am in my own body can feel like her excitement, like she gets to be part of an interwoven experience that way.
Yeah. Any other questions you might have for Paul going forward from what we know of him and what he was saying?
Yeah. Are there other situations, Paul, where the wishy-washy just feels too much and it's kind of like, man, this is not like a contained trip. This is a totally different situation?
You mean just in general or with reference to the trip?
Just in general.
She drives me nuts with our finances. I can tell you that's extraordinarily wishy-washy to her, and I can't pin her down on that. If I put my best foot forward, it's a very difficult conversation to have. And I guess at times, raising our kids, what boundaries and values we share in that regard, she can be kind of wishy-washy and just very closed off on those subjects, and sex. Finances, kids, and sex, right? It's like the three-headed horse. Those conversations are extraordinarily difficult to have and are typically off limits to her in terms of opening up and actually getting somewhere. So,
well, thank you. I want to use that, and I'll press pause and then we'll come back. So let's utilize that to go through. I'm putting into the chat right now as well, the head, heart, balls, and breath. So vision in your mind. So Paul, you had vision for what you wanted to suggest when you went to Boston, and maybe you don't have as much strength in your vision around parenting or around sex and connection there, which we've talked about on this call before too. But gratitude in your mind for what you have. Heart, open posture, love in your heart, which means you're not in your head, you're not thinking, you're conscious in that moment. In your heart, empathy, curiosity, you feel inspired by your own life, as we were saying with Nevin earlier. Balls, to take action based off of your values, your clear values and your boundaries. You feel pleased with yourself and you own your sexuality with calibration. And then finally, breath. These 4 areas, head, heart, balls, and breath, we teach deeply on all of these subjects. This is just a beginner. This is skipping a rock across the top of the pond, as I say. Breath is slow, deep into your belly. Your speech is slow and low, relaxed body language. You're present with her. And Paul, as you said, you didn't care whether she chose one event or another in Boston, aside from going to see Fenway, but you were relaxed. Your speech was relaxed, I'm sure, because you didn't have a particular need for an outcome in mind. Yeah. So what else would you ask Paul about sex or parenting around the head, heart, balls, and breath? Like, what's coming up for you around that? And we've talked with Paul before. So what's in the top of your mind?
Yeah, well, I first just want to respect what you said is like the three-headed horse there. Those are not small things. Is there any part of what you got to experience planning the trip that you feel might start to have some more frame in any of those areas with her?
Well, I mean, money comes to mind pretty easily. I mean, the cost of the trip alone, had to be budgeted and make sure that, there's money available for that sort of thing. And trying to relate that to a more general, a general part of our relationship, though. Are you asking me how it's either the same or different, how the trip financially is the same or different from other challenges in that context?
Yeah, I guess what I was feeling was, I know the trip's a totally different thing, but I can only imagine like how steady you were, just even in your breathing and your heart, because this is something fun that you're planning. I didn't know if there was any part of that steadiness that it was like, man, maybe bringing this into like household finances and this one piece might create less kind of her pushing back or closing down. And I might be totally off on that.
I mean, his vibe.
Yeah.
That I was coming across.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I still need to work on, and the growth, that I see ahead of me is just approaching it the right way. I'm not always the best at that. It can come off abrasive. And then I get aggravated, I suppose, when we're not having a real productive conversation about it. And I'm sure she senses that probably right from the start. I've gotten much better at it. And when I'm really consciously aware of how I'm approaching that conversation, it does tend to get a little bit farther. Mm-hmm. It's less frustrating for me. So, I certainly own that part of it, right? Like I realize now doing the work that I haven't approached it very well in the past. And I think that is the obstacle, is that for years, really, she probably felt berated, judged, whatever she felt just by the approach to it. I mean, it was genuine, and it's a concern, but how I went about doing it has probably broken some trust. So,
yeah.
And not really taking, as far as the balls go, not really taking the leadership and saying, all right, look, I see a solution here. We're just going to do it this way for a while and see if that works, as opposed to like asking her like, hey, what do you think about this? Or why don't we do it this way? And then not really following through on that in my own right. So
this reminds me of a quick story. A man, he's actually an energy trader out of the Northwest, and they have 3 kids. She wanted to go back to work after the kids all went back to school. And she wasn't speaking up about needing help with the kids, so around children. So she wasn't really speaking up, but if he would suggest something, hey, how can I help? She would just close down and say, I got it. I don't need any help with anything. And the big cure for this, the difference in presentation, was to paint a picture, as you did, of these different places on this trip, to paint a picture of, all right, if we have a babysitter for this many hours a day, this is what it would feel like. This is what it would look like if we had a babysitter for this many hours a day. And she said, no, we don't need to do that. And his resoluteness was that he wanted to do something, that he was going to do something. This is a bit of your point. Like, all right, I want to make a decision in some capacity and then bring the story of those choices to her, instead of, hey, what do you want? And she doesn't know, because it's a cold start, as you were saying. But to warm it up with vision, warm it up with examples, warm it up with a scenario around each one. And things like that can be done in small ways for intimacy as well, right? I have 2 visions for Friday. One is we see the sunset walking along the path, and the other is that we're drinking a glass of wine on the porch, this kind of a thing. How do those feel to you? And asking in more poetic ways, I suppose, more visionary ways. Sounds like you're leaning into that, Paul. Yeah, I see you nodding.
Yeah, for sure. And I've really tried to do that. Those are great examples. It's, opening the conversation with that sort of thing, and having some direction. right? Not just shotgunning the approach, but actually having thought about it and saying, hey, I would really love this, or it makes me happy when we do X, and, or when we spend time doing Y and things like that. And what do you think about next week we go do X, or we spend time doing Y? So again, it's leadership, but it also presents her with the opportunity to accept or reject it. And I think it lets her know that she's, in the front of my mind, right? Wanting to connect with her. So I've seen positive outcomes from those exact examples.
Yeah, really well said. I was going to ask, does that help her feel like she's front of mind, and all the way back to the first post where she doesn't feel like a part of his life, but she wants leadership, as Paul and you and Patrick were saying? What are some other final words for Paul and all of the guys in our last couple of minutes here, please?
Yeah, Paul, that was so spot on. Like, she knows she's front of mind. Like, I felt my whole heart open with that. Like, oh, it does matter. Women can be really quick to feel like they don't matter, and then can have like really kind of not fun behaviors trying to prove that they do. And what you just incredibly illustrated was really inviting the feminine into, like, it is important. And I'm going to cultivate a space here where you can pour the water into this bowl and we can play with what's here. And that I also feel too, you were so spot on with, like, hey, when it's, the cold open question, she shuts down. There really is, women can react in different ways, but one of the most powerful ways the feminine responds to a cold open question is that anxiety and shut down, and her whole mind goes blank. I think other women can be a lot more fiery about that. I certainly resonate with the mind blank thing, and that can make her feel really powerless and then not trusting of the space. And so what you just illustrated so beautifully was a way to, like, I have vision and focus here. I'm inviting you in, and she gets to weave who she is into your vision and focus.
Very cool. Thanks, guys. Fantastic. To find more of our stuff, greatmenmovemountains.com. Love seeing you guys here. Cynthia, thank you so much.